Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be wherever you are. Hope you're having a great day. And welcome to another special bonus installment of the University at Buffalo School of Management Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness 52 Weeks of Leadership program, sponsored by Geico. If this is your first one, the idea last January of 2021 was to kind of keep in touch with everyone virtually while we were all kind of hunkered down during the coronavirus pandemic and keep the leadership development train running. So we made a series of videos, series of webinars, one every week, every single Monday of the year. Well, maybe Tuesday for holidays like Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Weren't sure how we were going to pay for it. Weren't sure if we were going to be able to make it available to everyone. But thanks to the efforts, the sponsorship of Geico Careers, we were able to make that happen. So thank you very much, Geico. Hi, my name is Jim, and I'll be guiding you through this session. Now, one of the weird things, usually the 52 Weeks of Leadership is live, but for these recordings, I know what day today is for me, and might be a completely different day for you. But here in this studio right now, it's December 23rd, 2021. And December 23rd is an important day. It's a neat day because it's the date of at least two that I know of, unofficial holidays that you may or may not celebrate. Now, the first one is called Christmas Adam, and my kids love to call December 23rd Christmas Adam because, well, as we all know, Adam came right before Eve, so if Christmas Eve is December 24th, then Christmas Adam must be December 23rd. Not a whole lot of festivities or celebrations around that one, but a different holiday on December 23rd that has gained more and more popular attention, especially for those of us who are fans classic television, is this idea of Festivus. And what you see on the screen right next to me is the story of Festivus as told by Mr. Costanza. Frank Costanza, was that his first name? I should look more clearly at this. For those not familiar, Festivus, the holiday for the rest of us, has a lot of unique traditions that are involved with it. Instead of a tree, we have the Christmas pole, or the Festivus pole, the Festivus pole, made of aluminum, good, light, sturdy, no tinsel, that's distracting. We've got the feats of strength, that's always the most fun part of Festivus for me. But a really critical part of Festivus, a part without which I'm not sure it would have caught on so much, is something that we, at least in America, are really fond of. It's the airing of grievances. Festivus is supposed to be an opportunity for us to tell everybody all of the many ways in which they've disappointed us. Now, you probably haven't had a Festivus dinner or family get-together just for Festivus, but research shows that more and more often for the other holidays, like your Thanksgivings and your Christmases and your Hanukkahs and your New Year's, more and more we are airing grievances, actually. More and more we are getting into debates, we are getting into arguments, we are getting into fights, and we are spoiling relationships as a result of this. And maybe those are over, well, maybe they're over religion, maybe they're over work choices, maybe they're over personal choices or relationship issues. More and more frequently, they're over things like the coronavirus pandemic and vaccines, and a lot of times it all gets back to politics. So research finds that more and more in our lives, we are experiencing conflict, both in our personal lives and in our professional lives. While at the same time, research shows, at least my own data collections in West New York and abroad and all the different companies and organizations and people I've worked with, it seems like most of us are of a personality where we're not entirely comfortable with that, where we don't like conflict, where we don't like debate, where we don't like argument, where we'd rather everything be smooth and go really well. And this is a problem for us because for a lot of us, what I'm finding is it's against our personality to really dive into these conflicts and manage them effectively. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today, actually, more in a leadership context and a bit in a work context, although everything I'm going to say would apply just as well to your personal life, to your personal relationships. The title here, How Leaders Talk to People Who Disagree with Them. Again, hi, my name is Jim. We've had a couple of installments of the 52 weeks on conflict resolution and conflict at work, and those have been fantastic, and I definitely recommend you watch them. I'm going to take a little bit of a different take here, drawing more on general research rather than research specific to work, and I'm actually going to get a little bit into political conflict, just a little bit. Don't worry, I won't be getting political. To give you some examples of how this works and how it might come about in practice, and what the research says is often the best way that we can go about resolving this. Now, recently, I've been going back and watching some of the old episodes of the 52 Weeks of Leadership, and as a result, that's why I put that word, How Leaders Talk, because I was watching Neil Stroll's episode from week 2, a dynamite episode on leadership development, in which he took the definition of leadership that I put forth way back in week 1, that you see up on the screen, and he took it to the next level. He actually built on it brilliantly. I was a little jealous of what he did, saying that, yeah, that's leadership, the behavior, but if you think about it, leadership could also be thought of as a philosophy. It could also be thought about as a way of life. And let me build on what he said and dig into this. If you buy this definition of leadership that I presented to you, leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it, not because they have to do it, and helping them to accomplish things they didn't know they were capable of. Wow! Wow! That's huge. How many leaders have you had in your life that actually did that? It's rare, right? It doesn't happen often. You know, as I think of all the 15 or so leaders that I've had over the course of my corporate career, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 tops, not a whole lot. You know, I can think of a couple of teachers. I can think of maybe a family member or a coach or something like that. This is rare stuff. So if it's rare, that implies it takes a special kind of person to consistently do this. Are you that special kind of person? I'm not. I aspire to be. But I'm not. I want to be. I'm working my way towards that. And if you think you are, make sure you really are. And that's not, you know, not just a little bit of narcissism. This is a hard thing to aspire to, right? It takes a special kind of person. How do we become that kind of person? Well, we're the kind of person who thinks like this all the time, even when we're not leading, every day. So even if we walk into a conflict at work, we're thinking along these lines and thinking, well, what does a leader do here? And we know that conflicts do show up at work, and a lot of times our impulse is to be this person. We don't want to be a part of it. We want to hide. We want to shy away from it. There's a personality difference behind this. Part of the Big Five, which is the most meaningful personality test you'll ever take in your life, especially for work purposes. And one of the differences is called agreeableness, and it's basically the difference between whether you prefer to cooperate or compete, get along or get ahead, how comfortable you are with conflict. In all of my surveys of large organizations, of big organizations here in West New York and all over the country, some all over the world, we tend to score pretty high in agreeableness, which means we're uncomfortable with conflict. We don't like this. If someone starts a fight or an argument or a debate at work, we want to say, oh, no, stay away, get away. This is not something I want to be a part of. I'm going to walk away. Not my circus, not my monkeys. You guys just walk away from the conflict or just kind of punt on it, and you're not having the conversations you know you need to have. This is our nature. So let's get into conflict at work. We believe it's a bad thing. We don't like arguments. We don't like fighting with our coworkers, but even less than that, have you ever been in a meeting where somebody put forth a plan and somebody said, well, what do you guys think of this? And probably most people were like, yeah, that's fine. But there was this one guy or one girl who just kept saying, no, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And most of the people in the room are just like, hey, I just want to get this meeting over with and go home. Have you ever been in a position like that? Which one were you? Which one were you? Because you could say that the person who is having all of these arguments to make, you know, maybe they're a troublemaker. You could say the person who says, let's just get this meeting over with, well, maybe you're not taking the meeting seriously enough. Maybe you're not taking the project seriously enough. Is the project worth debating to this measure? There's a lot of interesting viewpoints there. Most people think of conflict at work as a bad thing. That's not quite what the research shows. In fact, here's a graph that shows pretty much what we found. It's what we call a curvilinear relationship, and what this means is basically at low levels of conflict. You know, we've got just a little bit going on. It's not a lot. It's not too intense. Nothing like that. But low levels of conflict, that's actually not. That's not a good thing. Why would that not be a good thing? Because if nobody's debating anything, if nobody's speaking up about anything, there's a lot of creative ideas that are not being shared. There's a lot of criticisms and objections. There's a lot of problems that are not coming out. So if there's just a little bit of conflict, that's not a good thing. If you've got a moderate level of conflict, we actually find that's the best thing for workplace performance. And the reason for that is usually at this level, all this conflict is what we'd call task conflict. Task conflict means we're arguing about how to do something, or what we should do, or what are the processes we should use. It's not getting personal. We're just saying, hey, I think I see a better way to do this. I think we could do this a better way next time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Again, let me say this clearly. If you're in an organization, if you're leading a team, and 2 of your team members disagree on how something should be done, that's a good thing. Because that means they care enough, that they care enough about what you're doing, that they're going to stand up for the way they think it should be done. And if they're seeing problems with each other's viewpoints, you know, there's some critical thinking going on here, and you've got a better chance of getting to the place where, well, now we know what the best way is. And, you know, reality is usually somewhere in the middle. The problem is, the more task conflict there is, the more we jump to some psychological conclusions that we really shouldn't, and the conflict escalates, and before we know it, instead of being task conflict, it's what we call relationship conflict. And relationship conflict basically just means instead of arguing over how we do this thing or which product we should offer or how much it should cost or what the schedule should be, instead we're arguing about your mother's glandular position. It's more like, your mom was so fat when she walked by the TV, I missed 3 episodes. It's stuff like that, right? And that stuff is never good. In an organization, it's not really conductive to anything effective in your personal life either. But the problem is when you've got the good conflict here, as it gets more and more and more, for some reason, we always seem to take it into relationship conflict. And that's where it kills us in organizations and in our personal life. But if you're a manager, lesson 1 here, if you're a manager, just because some employees are arguing, even if they're getting passionate about it, about how to do something, that's a good thing. Just make sure it doesn't get to the next level. Now, here's why it gets to the next level, and we're all guilty of this. I'm about to put a question up on the screen behind me. And I want you to answer that question honestly in your head or speak it out loud with the first thing that comes to mind. And look, I can't see you. This is so unfair. You can see me, but I can't see. I can't see you. I can't hear you. So be honest. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I present this question? When someone disagrees with you, why? Why did that happen? Why did they disagree with you? Just first thing, impulse, intuition. Why did someone just disagree with you? What's the first thing that pops to mind? Usually when I do this exercise with students or with corporate folks or executives I'm training, I hear responses like, well, they're misinformed. They don't know what they're talking about. They're wrong. They don't have access to all of the information that I have. They don't have my education. They haven't thought this through as much as I have. They don't care as much about it as I have. They don't have the company's best interests at heart. They're a bad person. And let's be honest with each other. When I first had this question presented to me, when someone disagrees with you, why? The very first thing thinking, well, I know something they don't. Did you have an attribution like that? That's what we call that. We call that an attribution. An attribution is an assumption of why something happened. In this case, it's an assumption of why someone disagreed with you. What was it that came to mind for you? Was it, well, maybe I'm wrong? Is that what comes to mind for you? Because it's a very, very, very small percentage of the world population and a much smaller percentage of the American population that would ever come to a more humble conclusion. What we usually say is either the person disagreed with me because they're dumb, or the person disagreed with me because they don't have my best interest at heart, or they don't have the company's best interest at heart, or they don't have the relationship's best interest at heart. You see what I'm getting at? So we jump to a conclusion because our brain, our subconscious, does not like being wrong. We jump to a conclusion subconsciously that puts all of the weight of being wrong on the other person. Leaves our subconscious feeling good. It prevents cognitive dissonance because we know you're right, but it's not the best way to resolve a conflict. If your assessment was negative in any way, shape, or form, if your answer to that question I just asked you was negative in terms of they don't know what they're talking about, if it was like mine where I said, I probably know something they don't, yeah, that's a little narcissistic, isn't it? And you're the victim of what we call an attribution bias. Don't feel bad about it because 99% of humanity would answer that question in a negative way. That doesn't mean it's a good thing, though, and acknowledging it is the first step to doing something about it. So here's how this works, basically. As it says up here, we are psychologically primed to believe we're right. Self-doubt, our mind hates that. Our subconscious hates that because then we have to think, okay, are we right or are we wrong? This is conflicts, this is hard. It's so much easier to go through life if you just always think you're right. That's true in our conscious, it's true in our subconscious. It holds us back a lot of ways, right? Thus, if your subconscious really wants to believe you're right, if your conscious wants to believe you're right, then logically, anyone who disagrees with you must be one of those two things. They're either incorrect, they're stupid, they're uneducated, they're uninformed, or they're evil. They do know what should be done, but they don't want to do it because they have an ulterior motive, something like this, right? You probably have this mindset. It's embarrassing. It's negative. I do have this mindset, and you probably do as well. But here's the problem. Your opponent does too. Whoever you're having this argument with, whoever you're having a conflict with, whether it be at work, in a relationship, they're thinking exactly the same thing. If you're thinking, well, they're uninformed, they're thinking, well, you're uninformed. And I know it's easy to say, well, no, they're just the bad guy. How often is that really true? Sometimes it is, but not too often. So we each think of each other as the stupid bad guy, and that's why so many conflicts go from task conflict to relationship conflict. And you can just look at politics for a really, really, really depressing example of this. This poll that you see right up next to me, it basically asked Republicans and Democrats, what do you think about the other party? You know, what are their characteristics? What are their traits? How do you view people who don't agree with you politically? And, well, what do you see? Republicans and Democrats tend to believe that members of the other party are unintelligent, that they're closed-minded, that they're unpatriotic, that they're lazy, that they're immoral, that they're bad people. These are people we've never met. But since they disagree with me, they must be stupid and evil. And you know, there are some exceptions here. Okay, some Republicans say, well, maybe Democrats are a little more open-minded. Some Democrats say, well, maybe Republicans are a little more patriotic. Okay, there's that. But they're still stupid and lazy and evil. And that's the root of a lot of the problems with the division in our society. Instead of trying to understand each other, we just assume that they're dumb and bad. And this is a result of a phenomenon that psychologists call splitting. And I went to Google image search and I did a Google search for splitting, and this was the picture I found, and I thought it was so cool I just thought I'd include it in this presentation. Splitting works like this. We like to view everything in terms of a dichotomy. So it's either good or it's bad. It's either black or it's white. It's either light or it's dark. It's, you know, that's simple for us. We don't like shades of gray. It's one or the other. So one side is all good, one side is all bad. You know, I wrote once, my grandmother and my 3-year-old are saints, but the guy who cut me off in traffic and the tobacco company executive, they have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. That's what we're talking about with splitting. We tend to view things in terms of these absolutes. And we do this, again, because our brain doesn't like to handle contradictions. We are cognitively lazy. Our brain is always trying to find shortcuts because there's so many stimuli all around us that we could get distracted by. Shiny object syndrome. I'm guilty of that. That we try to keep things as simple as we possibly can. So it's hard to acknowledge that someone we think is good could have any flaws. Like, if you asked me to tell you my grandmother's flaws, I got nothing. She's perfect. She's a saint. There were only 2 people in the history of the world who never sinned, Jesus and my grandmother. That's the kind of thing I would say, right? And my kid is perfect. Tell me a redeeming quality of someone you hate. Ooh, that's a tough one. Think of a political figure who you really, really dislike. Now tell me something good about them. You know, you get, oh, I don't want to do that. That makes me, yeah, that's you're splitting. You're splitting. I do it, you do it, we all do it. Again, nothing necessarily wrong that you do it, you know, nothing to feel bad about, but it's something to acknowledge because it'll help you resolve conflicts better if you understand that you're doing it. Now apply that to what we've been talking about, conflicts. You both see the other as wrong or evil because of this, and this gets in the way of resolving a conflict, right? We can't work together to find the right answer until at least one of you stops thinking of the other as wrong, evil, what have you. And if you call yourself a leader, if you're in this mindset, I'm getting people to do things because they want to do them and I'm developing people, if you have the gall, if you have the nerve to call yourself a leader, then that responsibility is yours. You're the one who has to be humble. You're the one who has to step up and say, maybe you're not evil. Maybe I'm not 100% right. You know, maybe there is something to what you say. And I know that's not what we want to do. But think of it this way. When you get in an argument at work, and I put at work in there, but you know, this could work just as well for your personal life. When you get into an argument at work, what do you really want out of that? What's your goal? What's your end game? What are you going for here? Research shows and common sense shows that there's really one of 2 things you're probably going for if you get in an argument. It's one of these 2 things. Either you want the truth to win out. So your goal in getting this argument is you want truth to prosper. You want to find the right answer. You want to find the correct answer. That's why we're debating, because we need to find I need to figure out if it's you. I need to figure out if it's me. I need to figure out if it's something in the middle. That may be your motivation. Or your motivation could simply be, I want to demonstrate how smart I am. I want to be right, and I want you to be wrong. Now let's be honest with each other. When we get into arguments, debates, constructive conflicts, whether it be at work or in person, which one of these 2 motives do we use a little bit more often? You know, are you really thinking, let's get at the right answer? Or are you thinking, I am going to convince you I am right? Let me put this another way. When the other person is making a point, are you listening to try to figure out if you should be convinced by that? Or while they're talking, are you already thinking about what your rebuttal should be and what you're going to say next to try to prove that the person is wrong? Excuse me. I should have had some water before I walked in for this, absolutely. I've been filming a lot of these lately. You see what I'm getting at? Usually, at least for me, I find when I think back on arguments I've had, it's not so much about wanting the truth to win out. It's about, I want to be right. I want that person to come to me later and go, oh, you were so right. I was so wrong. I was so stupid. I apologize. You know, sometimes we have dreams about that, daydreams. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if they came to me on their knees and told me how smart I was. Okay, if you feel that way, even a little bit, your motivation's wrong. Your motivation's wrong. And if you have the nerve to call yourself a leader, you have the responsibility to snap out of it. You call yourself a leader, then it's your job. Because think about it, in any conflict, in any argument, one of three things can be true. And I put the one you probably like best up first. It's possible that you're 100% right, which means if you call yourself a leader, it's your job to persuade the other person of the truth. And keep in mind, research shows again and again, believe it or not, nobody in the history of the world, nobody's going to be convinced or persuaded by you yelling at them. That doesn't happen. By you just calling them stupid, by you telling them they're wrong, by you believing they're evil. People don't get convinced by that. People get convinced when people understand their viewpoints and they find new points or they find ways to look at them in different ways. We'll get into that more in a second. But it's your job. You call yourself a leader. It's not your job to coerce them into doing what you believe is right. It's your job to persuade them that what is right really is right. And that's one of the big differences between leaders and managers, right, is whether you coerce or whether you persuade. But that's only one possibility, one of three possibilities, and honestly, it's not the most likely thing in most cases. It's also possible that they're right, and you are 100% wrong, and I know what you're thinking, Jim, you don't know me. In this case, I really am. Okay, whatever. But will you admit the possibility? I mean, 1%, 0.1%, it could be that they're right. Now, if they were right, we know they're not, but if they were right, and you call yourself a leader, well, what would a real leader do when they were wrong? Well, they'd admit it. They'd be humble about it. They'd listen. They'd listen for evidence. They would do their best to understand why they were wrong. They would do their best to understand what mistake they made in getting to the wrong conclusion and how they can avoid it in the future. So again, if you call yourself a leader, it is your job to listen very carefully and allow yourself to be convinced, allow yourself to be persuaded that you were actually in the wrong so that you can be in the right next time. That's possible, right? And then the final possibility, and this is what it is more often than anything else, the truth is somewhere in between the two viewpoints. You call yourself a leader, we're still on that, you call yourself a leader, it's your job to reconcile that. It's your job to figure out where you're right and they're wrong, and it's your job to figure out where they're right and you're wrong, and it is your job to act accordingly. See, I keep saying this? It's a big responsibility to be a leader. If you call yourself that, if you are the kind of person that gets people to do things because they want to and develops people, that means it's your job, no matter if you're right or wrong, it's your responsibility to do something about this. It's your job to resolve the conflict. It's your job to find the truth. And let's be honest with each other. This isn't how we do it, right? This is how we do it, right? I used this line the other day with my wife when we were having an argument. All I know is, one of us is right, the other one is you. She didn't appreciate that. And looking back, I'm not sure it was the most effective thing I could have said to resolve that conflict. Looking back, I kind of regret saying that, but we want to. We think it's going to feel so satisfying when we say it, right? You call yourself a leader. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because most of us are just so confident that we're right, whether it be a work dispute, work conflict, planning, processing, or even something in our personal lives in a relationship. But here's one of my favorite quotes. The problem with the world, the intelligent people are full of doubts. The stupid ones are full of confidence. And whenever I've shared this with someone, always everybody in the room nods. Okay, well, let me ask you this. Are you full of doubts? Because I believe you're an intelligent person. Are you full of doubts? Not doubting necessarily yourself, but always listening. I give a lot of speeches about this thing called servant leadership. And the guy who came up with it, Robert Greenleaf, wrote a lot about how listening is one of the most fundamental skills in the leader's toolbox. And actually silence sometimes, talking less. He actually said, here's one of my favorites. He said, the leader always thinks to themselves, if I speak up, will that actually improve on the silence? Greenleaf talked about how the great leaders are always listening to people around them to try to figure out, am I wrong? Do I need to re-examine my assumptions? Is what worked 2 years ago still what works best today? Is what worked before the pandemic still what works best today? Is what we've been doing during the pandemic still the best thing to do? There's a lot of different ways to look at this, right? But the leader is full of doubts, not in themselves and not in their people, but in the ideas and in the assumptions by which they've been living their life and running their organization. So where could you be wrong? You know, what could your blind spots be? These are important things to see. And I know this isn't what people want to hear. You know, you're telling me basically, Jim, to resolve a conflict, I have to admit that I might be wrong. Well, yeah. And you might be thinking, well, that's not fair. They're not going to admit that they might be wrong. True. Who's the leader here? Who's the leader? Who is really interested in being right? And who is really interested in learning? So all this is well and good, Jim. How do we actually do this? I mean, you promised this would be about resolving conflict. Yeah, you know, can you give us some steps here? I hear you. I understand. Let me give you some of the best advice I can possibly give you. And it's not from me. This actually comes from a gentleman who really isn't known well enough, I think, in the modern world. This is a picture of him. His name was Dr. Carl Rogers. He died many years ago. But he was the father of modern, not psychology, but psychiatry. This was the guy who looked at the people who were going to see psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists and counselors and said, it's our responsibility to take care of these people. They're not customers. They're clients, they're patients, they're partners. He really believed in the power that psychology and psychiatry could have to really make people's lives better. So if you've ever benefited from the guidance of a counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist, you probably have this guy to thank. And he wrote a lot about conflict resolution. He wrote a lot about the things I've been talking about, how we tend to assume we're right and we tend not to listen to evidence that we might be wrong. And with all that in mind, he wrote a 3-step plan. For this is how you can resolve conflicts really effectively. It's not going to work all the time. It's not, but it's going to work more often than you think, and it's going to get you to different conclusions, more satisfying conclusions than you might otherwise have. Here's how it works. First, and boy, this is rough, before you argue a point at all, before you say this is what I believe, before you say this is where you're wrong, before you say this is where I'm right, before you do any of that, you have to explain the other person's position. And you can't just say, because when I first heard this, I tried this, yeah, you've got this stupid idea that, nope, can't say that. You've got the wrong idea, nope. You got some bad information over here, nope. You don't get to say anything like that. You've got this idea I disagree with, nope. You say, here's what you believe and here's why. And you go into some detail on this. And you have to keep trying that until they look over at you and say, yeah, you got it right. That's your own words, but that's exactly how I feel. That is what motivates me, and that's what I believe we need to do here. And what you're going to find, more often than not, if you really did this, you're going to find you can't do it the first couple of tries because you are making assumptions as to what their motivations are, the exact steps of their plan, or the big picture. You probably, not always, but probably, you are filling in the blanks on their position. Maybe it's their motivation, maybe it's the assumptions they made. And when you try to speak their position in a way that will be satisfying to them, they're going to say, no, you got it wrong, you misunderstood. That's not what I think this. So right from the beginning, it's probably going to reveal some misconceptions that you've had. And again, you've got to do this to them. You've got to say this to them in a non-judgmental way to the point that they say, yes, I am satisfied. That's how I feel right now. That's you've nailed it, right? And then you think, okay, so now that I've done that, now I can tell them where they're wrong, right? Nope, not yet. Step 2, when you've done that, you go back to what you just said, and you identify and state, okay, from everything I just gave you 5 points, I agree with 3 of them, or I agree with 2 of them, or I agree with 1 of them, or wow, I actually agree with 4 of them. If you've really done this in a comprehensive and complete manner, you will find yourself probably agreeing to more than you would have thought with this person's position. So you've got to say, of everything I just said, here are the things I agree with. You don't get to say what I disagree with. No. Here are the things that are in your position, whether it be motivation, process, plan, big picture, whatever. Here are the things that I agree with. And then and only then do you get to state your own point of view. But here's where I differ. So why is this such a good idea? There's a lot of reasons, and you can probably figure some of these out. One way, it gives you credibility. It proves to the other person that you understand their position. Another way it gives you credibility is it shows that you actually care about their position. You're not actually writing them off or something like that. Another way it helps is that it helps you understand better where they're coming from and fills in gaps. That's stating back to them what their position is. It's like paraphrasing after feedback, right? It corrects misunderstandings. Okay, I thought you were motivated by this, but now I see you're motivated by this. And maybe it's possible you go through this and you get convinced. And some people are uncomfortable with this because, well, I don't want to be convinced. And if that's where you are after watching these last 30 minutes, and this is where you are at this stage in your life, this isn't for you. This is for mature people. This is for adults. If you are afraid of being convinced that the other person is right, I mean, then your motivations, your heart is after winning. Your heart is not in finding the truth, and this is about finding the truth. And it is possible. I've done this before where by the time I got to step 2, I realized, wait a second, I was mistaken. I actually agree with most, if not all of this. And that's a good place to be because, hey, conflict resolved and you've learned something. But it's very possible that there will be other things. And now the tricky part is, okay, now that I've done this for you, now that I've gone through these 3 steps for you, will you go through these 3 steps with me? You ask them, would you state to the best of your ability what you believe my position is? And to be clear, not everyone's going to be willing to do that. As I've worked both in resolving my own conflicts and trying to mediate some conflicts, I find that it's not a lot. You know, I found maybe 10, 20% won't do it. And that tells you a lot about their motivation. That tells you a lot about their open-mindedness. And some conflicts simply can't be resolved this way. But more than you think can. So again, not from me, from Dr. Carl Rogers. 1, sit them down and respectfully tell them, hey, here's what your position is in my own words. Did I get it right? Step 2, of all those points, here's what I agree with. Here's where you and I are on the same page. Look, we're building bridges. But step 3, given that I'm going to stand up for it, I still think this is where I disagree and here's why. And then I guess step 4 would be, will you repeat this process? Will you try this with me? And when you do that, you're going to find yourself much closer together than you were before. It might not resolve it entirely, but at least you've got the groundwork to go there. And you've convinced them, and hopefully you've convinced yourself, this person is not stupid or immoral or evil. We're just coming at it from different perspectives. And research finds that's often the case in work conflicts, in personal conflicts, even in political conflicts. Often we have a lot of the same motivations. We're just getting there a different way, and we're seeing things from a different perspective. And that means that there's a lot of room there to find agreement. So that's what, normally I say we're sharing cutting edge research with you here on the 52 Weeks of Leadership. This is not cutting edge research. This guidance is decades old. So this isn't cutting edge, but it works. Try it. If you don't believe it, try it. That's the one thing you can do. Think about, one thing you can do taking from this, a tangible thing you can take from this. Think about someone you're going to have an argument with, someone you need to have a discussion about, someone you disagree with. Try this. Maybe it's around the Festivus table as you're airing the grievances, or a holiday table. Maybe it's with an employee that you and I, we've never been on the same page on this project. Do you think we should go this way? We can go that way. Let's try a new way to resolve this and see where we really stand. And again, not always going to work, but I think you'll find it more effective than you would have expected. And that's this installment of the 52 Weeks of Leadership. Thanks for joining us. Don't know when you're watching this, but coming up in 2022, we've got a whole new version of this where we've got different focus topics. Every 12 months, we've got weekly content that's going to come out to you for free. All you have to do is register on our website, Google the 52 Weeks of Leadership, as well as monthly events at some of the top organizations in West New York, where we bring professors and research experts together to talk with executives and managers and try to figure out where's the truth, what really is, how can we integrate the findings from research and practice to really understand how to be better leaders, how to be more effective, how to be more satisfied, and how to accomplish the goals of organizational psychology, which is basically to improve the dignity and performance of human beings in the organizations we work within. So thanks for joining us. We'll hope to see you again soon at another UB Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness event.